I was gonna say I grew up in the church. My parents joined the church, and got saved at 11 when I was about 11 years old, and then we were in church.
Right.
That was our lives. Youth choir, young adult choir, ushers, drill team, all the things, right? Like that was part of my experience. And so church became a place of community for me. It was a place of connection for me. But I don't think at that period in time that I'd had yet a encounter. I think that I, as many children sometimes do, borrow from their parents, experience. And so I went away to college, and there, of course, God is strategic, right? The word had been seeded in me, right? Like, so I might have been raising my hand in Sunday school in seventh grade because I wanted to know all the answers, because I wanted to please, because I've had this traumatic experience. And so my trauma was teaching me that I had to perform for love and for affection. So let me answer all the questions. Let me be the smart one in the room. Let me do all of that. That might have been what the enemy meant for me, right? But what ended up happening was, while I'm memorizing these verses in Sunday school, and like the word is being seeded in me, I just don't know how to quite access it yet when I need it at that time. And so went away to college, separated, in the sense that I wasn't actively attending a church. And then, adulting happened. and I moved away from Kentucky, lived in Chicago for 3 years, lived in North Jersey. And I felt like there was this constant running that I was doing, running away from my past, yes, but also I think running away from the pull of God in my life, right? So even as I even began my writing career, I was writing Christian fiction. I think this because we had met that I was writing Christian fiction, and I believed in Jesus. I had accepted Jesus. But there was a disconnect between my profession of faith and how I would walk it out in my life, right? And that doesn't mean that I was out there wilding out. Like I wasn't actually, but there still was a void, right? That I didn't yet know that God could fill, because I had kept God in the box in which I had been taught, right? So there was some theological explorations that I had to do in my life to understand, well, what do you really believe about God? Because it wasn't the same as what I was taught, in my Black Baptist church of the 80s and the 90s in Louisville, Kentucky, right? And it wasn't that out there, right? So what do I believe, right? And through just a series of ongoing encounters, I really connected to God through the contemplative practices, right? So I was drawn to the Desert Fathers and the Desert Mothers and this idea of prayer and meditation and sitting with God. And so that is where I found a connection that was very different from the animated praise and worship that I was used to in my church. And I think I'm in this phase of my life now. Y'all getting I'm getting real transparent here, but like I'm in the phase of my life now where now God is bringing those two things together, because it's like my great grandmother used to say, you take the meat and spit out the bones, right? Like there were some things that I were taught about who I am as a Black woman that were not true to who Jesus said I was. And so those are some bones that I have to spit out. But there were also some good grace-filled things that I learned in the church of my childhood, right? In terms of how I worship and who I am as a believer that I want to hold on to. So I don't think we have to throw out everything, right? And then there's some things that I'm learning in the Christian contemplative practices of sitting with God in prayer and in meditation and being still and being quiet, right? And I think that's what's creating balance for me. So I'm drawing from my traditional African-American Black Baptist church experience, but I'm also taking what I need in terms of being quiet and being still enough to hear the Holy Spirit and to listen. And those two things are coming together, and it's you talk about spiritual formation. It is forming me actively as we speak, as I'm talking to you. So that's been the faith journey for me. But I recommend, if there is a recommendation, stillness. It has been, when the noise of life, and we talk about rage and sorrow and all those things, I don't know if I could have got to joy had I not learned how to be still. Right? Because I'm constantly talking in my head. I constantly have the voices, whether it is the church of my childhood, my parents, my upbringing, what I've seen, what I've been through. All of those things are voices. Those are parts of you that are talking at the same time and are reacting to things inside of us at the same time. So don't do that because I'm scared, right? And there's a part of me that will say, this doesn't feel safe, Tracy. I know you said God told you to go do such and such, but this doesn't feel safe based on what we know and our experience and what we went through, right? You can't do that. That's a part of me that's speaking to me. And I have to learn, and what stillness taught me and what embracing joy taught me was to turn to that part of myself and say, I hear you. I respect what you've gone through. I understand why this fear is coming up in me, my body right now, because you don't feel safe right now, that part of me. But have a seat, right? Because I got this, and even more than me having this, I got a God that's got me, right? And so I get it, I understand, because I don't believe in trying to shut down those parts of you, because they're valid, right? Like God has told you to go to school or go get this job or do this thing. And all those voices start to say, but what about this? And what do you think about that? And those voices are coming from a real place. Those voices are coming from places where you've been hurt and maybe didn't feel safe in the past, or something bad happened when you took those kind of risks. It's better to say, I hear you, I acknowledge where you're coming from, yet I will obey, yet I will still. And it reminds me of Christ in the garden, right? Like, if you could take this cup, God, I really would appreciate it, yet I will trust you, yet I will do that. And so I think we have to do that. In order to make room for joy, we have to have that space to do that.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for sharing that today.